This video is a response to the attempt to have Louisiana's Science Education Act repealed. I addressed this video to Zach Copeland, the high school student who is spearheading this effort to repeal this act, as well as the legislature of Louisiana and the entire scientific community of this country. First, to Zach. I have to tell you, I admire your stand. You have identified what you believe to be wrong and are speaking out against it. And I applaud your courage and your efforts. But you have been duped and are being used by the scientific community. You yourself are wrong to join in on the misrepresentation of the Science Education Act, calling it a creationism law. It is no such thing. And if you've ever read the wording of the law, you would know that. So I'm going to assume, for your sake, to give you the benefit of the doubt, that you've not read the intent of this act. And I'm sure you have the capability to Google Louisiana Science Education Act and see exactly what it intends to do. It merely allows for the introduction of supplemental materials to be made available to science students in the classroom so that they can see and evaluate the suppressed evidence that is edited out of science textbooks so that they might be able to make informed decisions about the origins of life on planet Earth. I saw you on YouTube pointing out that the state of Louisiana is going to lose millions of dollars in science convention money for trying to make more scientific evidence available to students. Now I stress, this act makes scientific evidence available. This is not bringing the Bible in. This is not talking about Adam and Eve or Noah's Ark or any other object of ridicule of the scientific community. This brings in valid, empirical, scientific evidence, and only that, according to the tenets of this act. But Zach, consider the unusual response of the scientific community to this act. Financial punishment in the millions of dollars? What if the Flat Earth Society got the ear of the legislature? What would be the correct response of the scientific community? They would say, okay, you want to prove that the Earth is flat? Let's look at all of the facts. But in this case, they didn't do that, did they? If science textbooks included all of the facts, this act would be unnecessary to begin with. Zach, you said on Hardball with Michael Smerconish, quote, "You don't need a law to teach critical thinking. That's what science is," unquote. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. But it is neither critical thinking nor science when you present in student textbooks a biased selection of evidence that agrees only with one of several possible conclusions. How can there be critical thinking when you have only one hand-picked and biased collection of evidence, all of which support only one of several theories? You have nothing to compare the presented evidence to. It is not science when you exclude a wealth of valid and empirical scientific, not religious or biblical evidence, scientific evidence that is both damaging and in some cases nullifying to the exclusive conclusions presented in the textbooks. It is not science when you misrepresent the intentions of a law that make a simple effort to have all of the evidence available to students so that critical thinking and evaluation is possible. Misrepresentation has also taken place, calling it a creationism law. It is not a creationism law. The proponents of intelligent design are not Christians disguised as scientists trying to sneak a repackaged creation account from Genesis back into the schools. These are competent and accredited scientists who have the same guts and courage that you do, Zach, to speak out when they identify something that they believe is wrong. Some of these scientists are Christians, but they're also Jewish scientists, and they are also Muslim scientists, and they are also agnostic scientists whose position is that it is not possible to know who the supreme being is. They neither accept nor do they promote the Bible or any other religious book. All of these scientists have taken their positions and have based their conclusions on valid scientific evidence and only valid scientific evidence. Second, where misrepresentation is concerned, it is misrepresentation to imply that the law supports the removal of all current science textbooks in order to replace them with creationist materials. The law calls for supplemental materials to be presented to the current science textbooks for comparison and examination. These supplemental materials are necessary because of the editing and tampering with the evidence that has taken place at the hands of the scientific community. Next, consider this. Is it within the purview of true science to retaliate with severe financial punishment in the millions of dollars to whatever person or group simply asks that all of the relevant evidence on a given subject be made available in the science classroom? Is this a valid response of science? Or is this not terrorism by definition? If the evidence being presented by the proponents of intelligent design is so weak and so inferior to the evidence for evolution, the scientific community should welcome the opportunity to demonstrate that inferiority. Instead, they have resorted to terrorism. They've attacked the state of Louisiana to punish the state to the tune of millions of dollars by withdrawing science conventions, conferences, and seminars from the state. Is this the behavior of anyone in possession of superior evidence on any subject? This behavior is not what science is all about. And this should raise a serious red flag to anyone making a career in science. Do you think for 1 minute that this behavior is limited to well-meaning legislators attempting to have all the evidence on a given subject made available? It is not. Scientists and educators in the field of science know that they have to drink the evolution Kool-Aid. Scientists who have been naive enough to even mention that the intelligent design theory exists have found themselves both fired and blacklisted. They have had their research grants denied and or revoked. Qualified professors have been denied tenure. Research websites have been shut down. Research papers not published. Is this also, Zach, what science is? To impose this kind of terroristic response to scientists who refer to the problems that valid scientific evidence poses for the theory of evolution? Have you considered, Zach, that the theory of evolution was first proposed by Charles Darwin in 1850, based on conclusions that were available using near Stone Age technology? Darwin could not have known that when he identified a single-celled organism as the first form of life, he could not have known the incredible intricacy of the machinery going on within that cell. The DNA of the amoeba, for example, which is a single-celled organism, the DNA, if committed to writing, would fill 1,000 complete sets of the 30-volume Encyclopedia Britannica. That amounts to 3 million pages of text. And because he did not and could not have known that, Darwin called the amoeba a quote-unquote simple example of primitive life. What is simple or primitive about 3 million pages of not merely information, but 3 million pages of programming language written in amino acids that guides the construction of the specific proteins that enable the amoeba to live, to consume food, to eliminate waste, to move and reproduce? Is there anything quote-unquote simple about that? How does that happen without intelligence guidance, Zach? How does evolution account for the production of 3 million pages of programming in the so-called simplest single-celled life form? You won't find an answer in the approved, edited science textbooks because they have no answer. And so they continue to misrepresent the amoeba using the same uninformed 1850 term that Darwin used for it. Simple. And in so doing, they keep you and every other student in the dark regarding the truth that is made available by the addition of supplemental materials to the science classroom provided by the Science Education Act. You won't read any of that in the current biased and edited science textbooks that spoon-feed their readers to come to the same false conclusions that the writers of the textbooks have reached. And that is not science. So the legislatures took the bold and courageous step to pass a law that does nothing more than to say that a student of science should have access to all of the evidence on a given subject, including the evidence that is deliberately withheld and edited out in order to make just one of several possible theories look like the true and only correct theory. And the financially punitive arm-twisting and arm-breaking tactics of the scientific community is going to cost the state of Louisiana millions of dollars if the legislature doesn't cave into their economic terrorism and repeal the act that makes all of the scientific evidence available to be examined. This is not how true and open science operates. Wake up, Zach. Withdraw and reverse your efforts to have the Science Education Act repealed. And do so in the name of science. For the sake of all the students who will follow you, I believe that you have the courage to hit the brakes in the name of the pursuit of truth and make a U-turn in this matter. You've been sold a bill of biased goods. You're being used by a scientific community which has betrayed the true tenets of the open scientific examination of all of the facts, and they have abandoned the idea of embracing whatever conclusions are reached when all of the evidence is examined, to the point of imposing severe punishment to anyone who defies them. Zach, if you think that this is an extreme, illogical, and impossible charge of what I've said about how the tactics of the scientific community, do yourself a favor. Find and watch a documentary called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, and see what the scientific community is doing to anyone who examines all of the evidence and comes to an opposite conclusion that they foster on people. And then, after having watched this documentary, then see if you still want to repeal Louisiana's Science Education Act.